Hey guys, welcome back to Tier 3 of our Dynasty rookie quarterback rankings. So we've been going through the 2023 rookie rankings, and last couple episodes, if you're not watching the overall episode, which I'm going to be putting out here, was Tier 1 and Tier 2. You can go back and see who we had in those ones if you watch just the individual videos, but Tier 3 is going to be pretty exciting. And in all transparency, we did Tier 1 and Tier 2 a couple days ago, and we're jumping into Tier 3 here on Monday after all the bowl games from the weekend. And I got to say, Dale, I'm liking my CJ Stroud quarterback number 1 a little bit more, and
I absolutely agree with that. He played out of his mind
oh my
the other
goodness,
night, and
against
I
the
was very proud. Very proud.
Oh, against the best defense in college football, too. Like, nobody
Yes,
expected that. And
yes.
the funny thing is, if you go back and you listen, if you're listening to this after, and you probably are, the funny thing is, we recorded that before the bowl game, and I talked about how CJ Stroud, he is a pristine pocket passer. He's one of the best in this class for sure in the pocket, but he has all the tools and ability to do things on the move, but he just never does it. And I talked about it on that podcast, and it was just hilarious to me to watch in that game. He started rolling out. He had so many yards on the ground and everything. I was like, that's what I'm
Absolutely.
talking about, man. So I just saw it. It was just the perfect encapsulation of everything I was talking about in the last podcast. So couldn't have planned that any better. But yeah, ironically, we're doing this after the bowl games. The one guy that we're going to be talking about here shortly is the one who had a horrendous bowl game this last weekend, if I remember looking at it correctly. And that is going to be my first guy in this tier, who's going to be Will Levis, who's probably going to be a first-round rookie pick in the actual NFL draft. I don't know if he should be in your rookie drafts or not, but this is the tier where it kind of drops off to... It's kind of that combination of guys who are going to have a lot of draft capital. I think Will Levis, like I said, is going to be a first-round pick. He's got the upside. He's got the tools, but he is way more raw than someone like Anthony Richardson, and I don't think he's as good. I don't think he has as much potential as someone like Anthony Richardson. So we can get into him real quick. You look at his stats, and it's just not great. He's a 4-year player. And my biggest thing when I look at college players, and again, I'm not an expert at college, so you can kind of speak on this a little bit more than me, but, if you see a guy playing for 4 years, most guys come out after 3 because they've shown enough on tape to really solidify themselves for that, right? But if you're playing 4 years and you're not really making a step forward or really kind of upping your game, that to me is a pretty big red flag. And I know that Will Levis is like top 5 rumors. Everyone's been talking about Will Levis to the Colts forever now, which please don't do that. I have to watch you every weekend. Just please don't do this. But if, the guy does have the raw talent, but if he gets that high draft capital, people are going to definitely jump on this guy in rookie drafts. And if he does get super high draft capital, just like Zach Wilson, people don't really like Zach Wilson now today, but he's going to get a chance somewhere else. And, your lifespan on someone like Will Levis is going to be a lot higher than some of the guys we're going to talk about in tier 4 probably here in a little bit. So Will Levis, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of this guy, but the reason I wanted to put him up here in this tier is because I do believe he's going to get a pretty high draft capital in the actual NFL draft, and then we're going to, see him around in your leagues for quite a while. So I wanted to talk about him. His stats, again, not the most impressive stats, but he was at Penn State from 19 to 20. And you really got to take 2020 with a big grain of salt, right? Because that was the COVID year. 2021 was kind of the COVID year too. So it's a little bit of that rolled into it. But the problem for me is in 2022, he played for Kentucky in 2021 and 2022. He didn't really take a step forward, and that's what I was talking about. You really want to see someone with this much experience taking a step forward in their senior year here. 2021, 13 games played, 353 passing attempts, 66% completion percentage, not terrible, 2,800 yards. 8 yards per attempt, 24 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. You don't love to see that. And then this last year, 2022, 200, he only played in 11 games, 283 attempts, 65% passer completion percentage, 2,400 yards. So a big dip there. It looks like they were pushing the ball down the field a little bit more. His yards per attempt went up by a whole half yard, which is pretty significant when you had that many less passing attempts that they're trying to push the ball more further down the field. Big dip in touchdowns, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So he turns the ball over quite a bit. But on the rushing side, this is where it's a little bit more interesting. And again, I hate the way that college tracks all this stuff, so I have really no idea. But 312 attempted rushes in college for a quarterback is quite a few. Now, the yardage isn't the most impressive because it's only 750 yards, but you take out all the sacks, it's probably closer to somewhere in the 1,000 to 1,200 range, which means he is definitely a threat on the ground, which we love to see for fantasy football. But again, he turns the ball over way too much for my liking. And, a lot of people are comparing him to Josh Allen, who, was pretty raw coming out of college. But I personally don't see the upside that Josh Allen had. Josh Allen he had a cannon for an arm, but his completion percentage in college was much less than Will Levis here. He had a completion percentage, I think, in the 50s coming out, and 66% is not terrible, to be honest with you. Like it's right middle of the pack, but yeah, it's the turnovers that really have me concerned. Do you have any big thoughts on Will Levis here?
It's with Levis, it's when I was doing my write up. I think he's a capable quarterback. I mean, back in his freshman year, I was able to see him play like against Ohio State, stuff like that. And he wasn't really anything special.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was pretty average, pretty basic, and I get the hype with the size and the cannon of an arm, but he's too much of a rhythm guy to really be a good quarterback in the NFL. I feel he has skills that I would say Zach Wilson, because for Zach Wilson, like, he just had it for 1 year against really, really bad teams.
Yeah,
Compared to
right.
Levis, like, he's I mean, in 21 and 22, he was at least consistent in those 2 years. It's the big thing I'm worried about is that like, his passing numbers aren't super good. For his last games in college, threw over 200 yards, and that was against Georgia, where they lost six. So, and he threw for 206. So, and not thrown for a lot of attempts. I don't know. Like, I don't know what their plan was. I just feel their offense was a this year, because they lost like Wandale Robinson, and they probably
Mm-hmm.
lost other players that lifted up Levis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Will Levis had to do a little bit different things this year, and he kind of plateaued.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his game logs, because Kentucky is part of the SEC, they do play a little bit more higher level competition there. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was just not great. Most of his touchdowns came against the lesser schools, if you will. A lot of his turnovers came against the better schools. So to me, that's a big red flag. So again, I don't love Will Levis, and I'm still going to give him respect. There's the potential that I'm wrong. A lot of us were wrong on Josh Allen, and the biggest thing with Will Levis is just that if he's drafted highly, which a lot of people out there are linking him to be drafted highly, if he gets that draft capital, and this is so early, he's going to be around for a while. He has the upside,
Yes.
to fill on the ground. So he's someone that I think is going to go way too high in rookie drafts. He's going to get, the Daniel Jones treatment of that draft year.
Mhm.
And
I agree.
if he ends up being a first round rookie pick, I'm out completely. He's my quarterback number 5 here. So, that kind of tells you where I'm at with him. He has the tools and the upside. So if you can get him in your super flex leagues in the early second, I'm all for that. You know, I don't mind taking a shot on a guy in the second round there. But for me personally, like we talked about in the last episode, in my tier 2, I really like Hendon Hooker. I think Hendon Hooker is much better. He's about the same size. You know, Will Levis is 6'3", 220 pounds. Hendon Hooker is 6'4", 220 pounds. Both are kind of mobile threats there. And Hendon Hooker has gotten better, you know, through his career, where Will Levis, again, he kind of didn't really improve. He just kind of plateaued there. So I personally, I think Hendon Hooker is going to go later, and he's someone I'd rather have anyway. So that's kind of where I'm at with Will Levis here. But there is the potential that I'm wrong. The NFL seems to be valuing him pretty highly. So I just wanted to bring him up here and kind of give him a little bit of the middle ground, because if we knew that he wasn't going to be a first round draft pick right now, he'd probably be in my tier 4 guys. That's because, like I said, I just do not really see much positives with him to overcome the negatives. But, you know, with all the draft hype that he's getting, I kind of had to respect that a little bit and compromise on my rankings here. Any final thoughts on Levis here?
Yeah, it's the big thing, which I've noticed a trend, if it's is for us talking about this, is really the landing spot. So, you know, I think he would benefit from being a late first round compared to an early round,
Mm-hmm.
you know, NFL draft pick. But you know, I see him going in and he's probably going to go to a bad team.
Yeah, I mean, even if he goes to the Colts, who, you know, are a bad team, but they're not. I don't know. The Colts are weird because I don't think they're actually as bad as their record is. You know what I mean? But
I agree.
Even if he went to the Colts, here the problem with Will Levis is I think he needs like a legitimate 2 years of setting behind someone to just to hammer him into something valuable. You know what I mean? And I don't think anybody is going to give him 2 years in the first round. You know, Jordan Love got 2 years just because Aaron Rodgers is the MVP back to back. Yeah. So it's just super rare for first round draft picks to get to sit that long on the bench. And I think that's kind of what Will Levis needs. If Will Levis went in like the 3rd round, I think that'd be perfect for him because it would mean he doesn't have all the hype around it, the potential, and he could sit behind someone for a couple years and then kind of see what he has then. But, you know, just trying to respect the man a little bit here in case I am wrong. So Will Levis is the big name here in my tier 3 rankings. The other guy I did have is Stetson Bennett, who is the quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, you know, probably one of the best teams in the NFL here. And Stetson Bennett, if you watch the bowl game here this other night against Ohio State, he played pretty well in that game. And, you know, his stats are not the most impressive, to be honest with you. But the one cautionary tale I would say with Bennett here is you do have to be a little careful because the Georgia defense is so ridiculously good. Rarely does it feel like Bennett has to win them the game. You know, he never really has to go out there and try. And you saw it in this bowl game when the game was on the line. He stepped up and he got it done, you know, and I know the defense gave him chances and everything, but, you know, he was able to get it done. Now, the biggest thing for Bennett, and, you know, again, looking at his stats, they're not the most impressive. He has consistently gotten better, though. He is a senior. This is his 4th year. Came back for one more year. He might be one of the only. Is there ever been a quarterback that's gotten back-to-back national championships? Like I think Georgia is one of the few teams that's ever done it, right?
Well, I think A.J. McCarron about 8-9 years ago.
Did he? Okay.
And
So he's in rare company that he might have back-to-back national championships. And again, I think he went back probably for the name and image likeness, to be honest with you, and also because the team is so good, they probably could get a second title there. So it is kind of weird to see him coming back, but you know, maybe he wanted to solidify his draft status a little bit more here. But you know, looking at his 2 years where he was the full starter the entire year, 2021 and 2022. 287 attempts, 65% completion percentage, 2,900 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Pretty good ratio there. And then you look at 2022, 13 games played so far. They'll have one more with the national championship, so these stats are not finalized by any means. But, 396, a big increase in passing attempts from 2021 to 2022. And the nice thing to see here is the completion percentage actually went up. It went from 65 to 68, 3,500 yards or 3,400 yards. The yards per attempt came down a little bit, so he's trying to push it down the field a little bit less. So it kind of makes sense why his completion percentage went up a little bit, taking a little bit more of the easy underneath throws. 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Again, big dip in touchdowns there, but, that's probably an aspect of them taking away some of those deeper threats, deeper options there. But, was consistently getting better from his junior to senior year here. On the ground, he is a rushing threat. And again, with the college rushing, I can't tell you exactly what he was able to do, but the last 2 years he has 8 touchdowns on the ground. Not bad. Basically 100 rushing attempts over the last 2 years. Not bad at all either. The biggest guy that he and I was talking to Dale about this before the podcast, who he reminds me of when I watch him play, is Derek Carr. Now, I don't really love Derek Carr, but Derek Carr for fantasy has always been solid. He's been good enough to get it done. And I think Stetson Bennett, if he gets any sort of draft capital, and again, if you're back-to-back national champion, it might be enough just to push him into the first round with how many needy quarterback teams there are out there. So any thoughts on Bennett before we kind of break him down a little bit further?
So with Bennett, like you just said that you think he may go in the first round.
I think so. I mean, is there any reason why he wouldn't? That's the question.
He's 5'11", has benefited from a very good offensive line, a very good rushing attack.
To be fair, though, that's the exact same argument that Mac Jones got to use, though, right? Like,
but I don't think Mac Jones is that good either.
I agree with you, but for fantasy, he's not terrible.
I feel Stetson Bennett is a lot like him.
Mm-hmm.
That's I feel for some of the listeners, they probably have no idea who Aaron is.
He busted out real quick.
Yes, yeah, he did. I mean, in college he was a decent quarterback, but I don't think Stetson Bennett does anything special. So I feel he's.
I agree with you, but
I don't think there's any way. There's no way he goes in the first. There's no way. The
only thing I would say is, though, I think people, as a whole, tend to undervalue some teams' desire for just a game manager. I think everybody thinks that these NFL teams, and most of them do. I don't think every team is run poorly, but a lot of these teams are just looking for a game manager. And I know it's not going to be the Niners. The Niners aren't going to go draft him, but let's say the Niners didn't have Trey Lance or Brock Purdy, and they were in the market next year. He'd be a perfect fit for someone like the Niners, and he'd be someone that they'd probably be looking for because we've seen him with a great defense. We've seen him with a great offensive line, be able to just, get it done. And I think that's going to probably propel him up. And there was already even the reports before that bowl game that a lot of teams are actually valuing him higher than a lot of people think. And I don't think that's a coincidence. That's all I'm saying. I think that he's a name that's going to be rising a lot, especially if they win next week, because we've seen it with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is that good of a quarterback, but how many times have people talked about quarterback wins are a stat and all this garbage about Jimmy wins, man? Jimmy wins. He's also the number one quarterback to win without scoring a touchdown, right? So, but it doesn't mean he's good and he deserves it, but I think that people overvalue winning, right? And he's done a lot of that with Georgia.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I just don't think he's like when I think of Georgia in their little dynasty that they've had. I don't think of Stetson.
I agree with you.
I feel he's done well with them, but I don't think he really been the key piece to a lot of their.
No, he
So,
definitely hasn't propelled them for
and,
sure.
I feel he's a decent quarterback, but I honestly see him going like early day 3, like a fourth round pick.
I just
I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, I think he would be lucky going.
So let's say let's say for argument's sake, right? Because we talked about it already in the last couple of tiers, right? CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, we think probably both of those guys are going to be first round picks. You don't think Hendon Hooker, I think he should be, but you don't think Hendon Hooker will be a first round pick. Bryce Young will definitely be probably the
Yes.
number one overall pick after
Yep.
his performance in the Sugar Bowl. Um,
Yep.
Will Levis more than likely will be a first round pick, right? So that's 4
Mhm.
quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't see anybody that we're going to talk about with tier 4 here jumping up into that top tier of quarterbacks, right? I don't think that they're going to
I
be first
agree.
rounders. I think
I
Hendon
agree.
Hooker and Stetson Bennett are the only 2 guys that could be first round picks. And how quarterback needy the league is right now, that's all I'm saying. I think that a couple of these guys might slip up there, and I don't think they're going to be high picks. I think they'll be later, like they trade to 30, 31 just to get these guys with a 5th-year option or something like that. But that's the only thing is I think that there's going to be more than 4 quarterbacks that go in the first round, and that's the only thing I'm kind of thinking here and looking at, especially since only one went last year. And I don't know. I just, I could see someone like Atlanta jumping up from they're using their second to move up to 31 or something like 32 even, and taking someone like Stetson Bennett. I think that Stetson Bennett would be perfect for someone like Atlanta. It's also a Georgia team there. And all they need is a game manager to not throw the ball away, right? So that's all I'm thinking. I agree with you. I don't love Stetson Bennett. I have the same concerns as you about the size and measurables.
Mhm.
But again, I think that a lot of teams are going to value the game manager ability that he kind of has here.
Right. Well, I do think he's going to get drafted, but I don't think he's going to be special. I think I honestly feel he's going to be holding.
So would you?
And with that, like, there's nothing bad with that. I just don't think he's.
So here's a question then. So if let's say Stetson Bennett ends up being a first round pick, where would you rank him in your like? How would you value him then?
I mean, I would still put him below. I would put him probably the first. I would rather have all those quarterbacks.
Okay, so would you still? So rather have Stroud, Richardson, Bryce Young,
Absolutely.
Levis? Would you put him above
Yes.
Levis still, or
Yes.
Levis above him? I
Yes.
mean, just for the physical upside of Levis.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
and then Hendon Hooker too. Who would you rather have?
I
Who would you rather
I
have, Hooker or Bennett?
I would probably rather have Hendon Hooker because I know he's willing to sling it when he needs to.
Even if,
You know, I feel Stinson Bennett can. I feel, I'm not saying he's a bad athlete. There for a reason.
mm-hmm,
I would much rather have Hooker, and I've seen more from Hooker
mm-hmm,
being able to make those NFL kind of throws
sure,
and to put a team on his back when I don't necessarily think Stinson Bennett could do that on a consistent basis to be to be that high of a pick.
there you go. Okay, so you would rather have. So let's say Hooker ends up being like third rounder, second, third rounder, and Bennett is a first rounder. Would you still rather have Hooker over Bennett? I mean, I would personally, but
Yeah, I would. Yes,
the
yes,
NFL would be telling us we we're wrong, but
yes.
they're not always right. But no, and that's the interesting with Stetson Bennett, and he's the one that, like I said, we're gonna have to watch him closely. And these are early rankings, so I'm ranking him in my top 6 guys here. I could definitely be wrong, and he could go much later than this. But again, I'm just trying to be fair with where I think that these guys are going to get drafted and then what their ability is. And I don't think that Stetson Bennett is ever going to have a super high floor, but I think that he has a pretty or super high ceiling, I guess. But I think he'll have a pretty safe floor if he gets draft capital. Now, again, just like with Will Levis, draft capital really plays a part into this. And I think that's kind of why we have a clear delineation between tier 1, definitely those guys that I feel safe drafting regardless of landing spot or draft capital. You know, they're probably going to get the draft capital anyway, but I'm fine with it either way. Tier 2, draft capital is a little bit more important to me, but I think that these guys are still pretty safe and that they're gonna show out in the long run. Tier 3, it's kind of, they're not the safest, and then draft capital is going to be even more important on top of that. So I think that's kind of why we have this big, difference in opinion on these guys, and draft capital is going to be huge behind Will Levis and Stetson Bennett.
Oh, I fully agree with that.
So these are just a couple names. Again, these rankings are going to change over time, and especially as the hype and everything starts to build up on the offseason. But again, I want to get these rankings out there early so that when the names and hype and all this starts rolling around, we're going to be able to track how it really moves these guys in the offseason, because there's going to be a lot of movement. At some point, you're probably going to hear rumors that Hendon Hooker is going to be the number 1 overall pick. It's just, that's how draft season goes, it feels like. And, these guys are going to move up and they're going to move down. And, oh, this guy said this one time back when he was 3 years old. And it's just like, there's so much in the draft season and the offseason that moves these guys' stock like crazy. So we wanted to get these guys' rankings out there early so we can kind of track it. But just, Bennett is a name that I'm telling you, he's going to shoot up the boards, just because, like, I think it'll ultimately end up being, and this is my honest opinion, I think it's going to be Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, number 1, number 2, Will Levis, number 3, Bennett, number 4, and Richardson, number 5. I think that's going to be your final consensus ranking on these guys, but we'll see how it goes. So that is tier 3. Any other thoughts on Bennett and Levis before we get out of here?
I think I've said all I need to about Ben.
hater, just because.
I like his game. I just don't think. I just don't think he's. I just don't think he's the NFL.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that, but maybe the best idea wasn't talking to an Ohio State fan right after a bowl.
No, I am fine with how the bowl game went. I'm actually pretty happy how it went. I'm more of the fan where I just want them to play well and to have.
That was a good game, man. It really was.
And they did, and I am bummed out about the result, but hey, that's part of life. So.
Yep. So, all right, that is tier 3. We're gonna take a quick break here, and then we're gonna be right back with tier number 4. Thanks for listening, guys.